Okay, we're going to look at chapter 5 now. Let's just recall where we left Nick. So he's been out with Jordan, this clean, hard, limited person, and by the end of it, he draws her closer this time to his face. So showing the evolving relationship between Nick and Jordan, and someone who he describes as limited, hard. She has a scornful mouth. Actually, what's the effect of this? Well, it draws him closer to her, and he physically draws her up closer to him. So starting with chapter 5, when I came home to West Egg that night, I was afraid for a moment that my house was on fire. 2 o'clock, and the whole corner of the peninsula was blazing with light, which fell unreal on the shrubbery and made thin, elongating glints upon the roadside wires. Turning a corner, I saw it was Gatsby's house, lit from tower to cellar. Straight away, we've got this very foreboding or ominous sign, blazing with light, and Nick thinks it's on fire. So he's fearful of a tragedy, which could obviously allude to what's about to come. This blazing with light, we could read many things into this. Firstly, it could represent the blazing emotions, and the really intense emotions that are present at Gatsby's house right now, because he's the only one there, perhaps in contrast to when the guests are there. It could also suggest Gatsby's constant showmanship. Even when he's the only one there, it's still blazing with light. It could represent a beacon for Daisy. Gatsby turns all his lights on as a beacon trying to attract Daisy. And remember that Daisy has a green light at the end of her dock, which attracts him. Or a fourth possibility could represent the fact that Gatsby turns on all the lights in his house, tries to make it blazing. Could show that he's afraid of the ghostliness of the dark. Not literally afraid of ghosts, but afraid of the isolation that dark represents. And this phrase, it felt unreal on the shrubbery. Well, unreal is a clear indication of the unnatural or constructed light here. At first I thought it was another party, a wild rout that resolved itself into hide a seek or sardines in the box, with all the house thrown open to the game. But there wasn't a sound, only wind in the trees, which blew the wires and made the lights go off and on again, as if the house had winked into the darkness. Well, this lights going off and on again links back to the constant flicker of light, doesn't it, that we've seen several times already. As my taxi groaned away, I saw Gatsby walking towards me across the lawn. Got a couple of pieces of personification here. Taxi groaned, and the house that winked. This suggests that these inanimate objects that surround Nick are all watching or all taking part in this scene, which shows the significance of the moment. So the personification highlights that. Your place looks like the World Fair, I said. Does it? He turned his eyes towards it absently. There's an absence in Gatsby's eyes. I've been glancing into some of the rooms. Let's go to Coney Island, old sport, in my car. It's too late. Well, suppose we take a plunge in the swimming pool. I haven't made use of it all summer. And the fact that Gatsby's got a swimming pool that he's not made use of in the summer, the perfect time for a swimming pool, shows another superficial aspect of Gatsby. But Nick's reluctant here. I've got to go to bed. All right. He waited, looking at me with suppressed eagerness. Gatsby fails to suppress his emotions. His mask slips. Because Nick recognises that Gatsby is eager, but he also recognises that he's trying to manipulate him. He's trying to control his emotions here. I talked with Miss Baker, I said after a moment. I'm going to call up Daisy tomorrow night and invite her over to tea. Oh, that's all right, he said carelessly. I don't want to put you to any trouble. What day would suit you? What day would suit you? He corrected me quickly. I don't want to put you to any trouble, you see. Well, this repetition just shows Gatsby's desperation for Nick's approval. He needs Nick at this point. Nick is his only opportunity to bring Daisy here. And so he's desperately trying to say, look, whatever, it's down to you, it's up to you. This repetition of you. I don't want to put you to any trouble. So Nick says, how about the day after tomorrow? He considered for a moment. Then with reluctance, I want to get the grass cut. Right, why does he want to get the grass cut? Let's have a look. We both looked down at the grass. There was a sharp line. This is quite humorous. There was a sharp line between where my ragged lawn ended and the darker, well-kept expanse of his began. Bit tragic of Nick's lawn here. I suspected that he meant my grass. There's another little thing, he said uncertainly, and hesitated. This is Gatsby's uncertainty and hesitation. He fumbles here as well. These are all coming to the fore now. Would you rather put it off for a few days, I asked. Oh, it isn't about that. At least, he fumbled with a series of beginnings. Why, look here, old sport. You don't make much money, do you? Not very much. This seemed to reassure him, and he continued more confidently. Well, this is important, because the thing that reassures Gatsby is the fact that Nick doesn't make any money. So, I've put here, Gatsby's confidence derives from knowing his superiority. He knows he is loaded. He's weighed down by money. Nick, not very much, and that actually reassures Gatsby. I thought you didn't, if you'll pardon my... You'll see, I carry on a little business on the side, a sort of sideline, you understand. And I thought that if you don't make very much, you're selling bonds, aren't you, old sport? Trying to. Well, this would interest you. It wouldn't take up much of your time, and you might well pick up a nice bit of money. Happens to be a rather confidential sort of thing. Well, here we go. This is a link back to Wolfsheim, isn't it? And these sorts of shady business deals that we now know Gatsby's part of. And Nick, this is interesting. I realise now that under different circumstances, that conversation might have been one of the crises of my life. But because the offer was obviously and tactlessly for a service to be rendered, I had no choice except to cut him off there. Nick's morality saves him. It absolutely saves him here. He says it might have been one of the crises of my life. So, because Nick feels obligated to offer the service, he feels like he needs to help Gatsby out here, he declines. He turns down this confidential sort of thing. If Nick didn't feel that he wanted to help Gatsby, then this might have been a crisis for him, because he might have taken him up on this opportunity and corrupted his moral character. So, Nick's moral obligation to provide an unrewarded favour, actually saves him. And there's a contrast between the old and new money values. Nick's old money values, well, he feels like he's got a moral obligation. I've got my hands full, I said. I'm much obliged, but I couldn't take on any more work. So very skillfully getting out of this. He's not offending Gatsby here. You wouldn't have to do any business with Wolfsheim. Evidently, he thought that I was shying away from the connection mentioned at lunch, but I assured him he was wrong. So when he says, I assured him he was wrong, Nick lied. He didn't assure him he was wrong, he basically lied. He waited a moment longer, hoping that I'd begin a conversation, but I was too absorbed to be responsive, so he went unwillingly home. Nick is fascinated by his developing understanding of Gatsby here. He was absorbed, so he didn't bother carrying on the conversation. He's just kind of fascinated by him. The evening had made me lightheaded and happy. I think I walked into a deep sleep as I entered my front door. Lightheaded and happy, by the way. This is kind of indicates perhaps love for Jordan. Also, perhaps lightheaded. This whole concept of Gatsby and what's going on and what he's about to do. So I don't know whether or not Gatsby went to Coney Island, or Coney Island, by the way, area of New York, which had a huge theme park, fairground attraction. Or for how many hours he glanced into rooms while his house blazed gaudily on. I called up Daisy from the office the next morning and invited her to come to tea. Where he puts glanced into rooms in quotation marks, Nick is now mocking Gatsby's sincerity. So he's now invited Daisy to tea. Don't bring Tom, I warned her. What? Don't bring Tom. Who is Tom? She asked innocently. Daisy is colluding with Nick. Who's this Tom? Well, my husband. So they're playing a little game together. The day agreed upon was pouring rain. This is foreboding, isn't it? Very ominous atmosphere again. And pathetic fallacy. We'll talk a little in the lesson about our definition of pathetic fallacy. At 11 o'clock, a man in a raincoat dragging a lawnmower tapped at my front door and said that Mr. Gatsby had sent him over to cut my grass. This reminded me that I'd forgotten to tell my Finn to come back. My Finn, is a servant. It's a Finnish servant of Daisy's who's come to help. So I drove into West Egg Village to search for her, the Finn servant, among soggy whitewashed alleys, and to buy some cups and lemons and flowers. The flowers were unnecessary, for at 2 o'clock a greenhouse arrived from Gatsby's. Literally, he has brought the entire greenhouse with him, with innumerable receptacles to contain it. An hour later the front door opened nervously, and Gatsby, in a white flannel suit, silver shirt and gold-coloured tie, hurried in. He was pale, and there were dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. Well, let's look at the colour. White, silver, gold. We've got the white. Clearly he's trying to emulate Daisy's purity. Remember, Daisy used to dress in white, didn't she? White, a constant colour associated with Daisy. But, of course, Gatsby is all about the bling, so he has silver shirt and gold-coloured tie, trying to impress Daisy. Daisy's purity, Gatsby's wealth. He was pale, and dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. Gatsby's immaculate presentation appears to be decaying here. This is weighing on his mind. This moment, this confrontation that he's waited for years, is now here, and it's taken its physical toll on his body. Is everything all right? He asked immediately. The grass looks fine, if that's what you mean. What grass? He inquired blankly. This adverb blankly. Oh, the grass in the yard. He looked out the window at it, but judging from his expression, I don't believe he saw a thing. So this is vacuous, isn't it? He's looking, but he's not actually seeing. Looks very good, he remarked vaguely. One of the papers said they thought the rain would stop about 4. I think it was a journal. Have you got everything you need in the shape of tea? I took him into the pantry, where he looked a little reproachfully at the Finn. Together we scrutinised the 12 lemon cakes from the delicatessen shop. Will they do? I asked. Of course, they're fine, he added hollowly. Old sport. This old sport is now hollow. He inquired blankly. Gatsby is now devoid of soul. He's soulless. He's vacuous. What's going on with him? This, not only has it taken a physical toll, pale, dark signs of sleeplessness, but his actual personality. Remember, this is a man who throws parties. His exuberant lifestyle, his opulent mansion. He's now blank, hollow, and vague, actually, as well. The rain cooled about 3:30 to a damp mist. This links back to Gatsby's letter. Right, we've got this damp mist. So remember, when he wrote this letter, when Daisy has this letter, she screws it up and it gets wet, and then she has to pull it out of the bath. And she is iced by Jordan and her friends. So the rain cooled about 3:30 to a damp mist, through which occasional thin drops swam like dew. Gatsby looked with vacant, there's another term here, vacuous, with vacant eyes through a copy of Clay's Economics, starting starting at the finished tread that shook the kitchen floor and peering towards the bleared windows from time to time to see a series of invisible but alarming happenings were taking place outside. Finally he got up and informed me, in an uncertain voice, that he was going home. "Why is that?" "Nobody's coming to tea, it's too late." He looked at his watch, as if there was some pressing demand on his time elsewhere. "I can't wait all day." "Don't be silly, it's just 2 minutes to 4. It's kind of a comical scene, isn't it? As soon as this moment's about to arrive, Gatsby cannot face it." I think we'll look at time in our next lesson as well, because Eliot made quite an interesting point, so we'll focus on time a little more too. He sat down miserably, as if I had pushed him, and simultaneously there was the sound of a motor turning into my lane. We both jumped up, and, a little harrowed myself, I went out into the yard. Under the dripping bare lilac trees, a large open car was coming up the drive. It stopped. Daisy's face, tipped sideways beneath a 3-cornered lavender hat, looked at me with a bright, ecstatic smile. We can read a lot into names in this novel. Daisy in particular. Obviously a daisy's a flower. We've got the lilac trees, and we've got her lavender hat. Daisy, the flowers. Obviously let's remember the greenhouse that Gatsby has provided. Not literally a greenhouse, but he's taken all the flowers as if they were from a greenhouse. So we've got these pure, these natural flowers associated with Daisy. "Is this absolutely where you live, my dearest one?" So Daisy's talking to Nick here. The exhilarating ripple of her voice was a wild tonic in the rain. I had to follow the sound of it for a moment, up and down, with my ear alone, before any words came through. A damp streak of hair lay like a dash of blue paint across her cheek, and her hand was wet with glistening drops as I took it to help her from the car. "Are you in love with me?" she said, low in my ear. "Why did I have to come alone?" Sorry, Karen. "That's the secret of Castle Rackrent." Well, this is a reference to a popular novel at the time. So they're kind of having a little play together. They've got a little playful relationship going on. "Tell your chauffeur to go far away and spend an hour." Nick having a little joke. "Come back in an hour, Ferdy." Then, in a grave murmur, "His name is Ferdy." "Does the gasoline affect his nose?" "I don't think so," she said innocently. "Why?" So this whole bit is very light-hearted. Light-hearted. Prelude, meaning coming before, to the meeting, which obviously is going to be a moment of great intensity